that being said, let's talk about dinosaurs, guys. I'm so freaking excited.
Roar.
Roar. Right? Okay, so I'm just
Actually, isn't it more like I can't even do it. I can't. Those stupid raptor noises.
You made me die.
I can't even do it. Whatever. It's so dumb.
Stop trying.
I just lost you guys. Cut. Edit the show. That's it. Over.
Yikes.
I got to find it now.
Choking on something there, bud.
We need to get like a raptor bark and put it in one of the noise buttons things. That would be
Just
actually
dolphin
cool.
noises, sped up and slowed down.
Is that really all it is?
That's all it is, pretty much. Dolphins and walruses and all these.
What about the T-Rex?
Elephant, lion?
You know what? The
like-
T-Rex roar, I think that they use the Sand People roar from A New Hope.
I think so.
to make that T-Rex roar, because it sounds just like the.
Well, that's how they made Chewy's voice.
You know, I do remember this. I know you're going to ask us our film experience about these later, but I'm going to say this. If I remember right, when they released Jurassic Park, it was brand new tech, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And if I remember correctly, I think the theater I had went to had just installed brand new sound system.
Ooh.
For this movie, and it was probably specifically for that T-Rex roar. Because man, I remember that thing was just insane. Just made my eyeballs pop out of my skull when it did it the first time. So
Yeah.
it was pretty cool.
It's a good sound. Yeah. I should have wrote some notes down or something. But yeah, the sound designer that did this movie is he's one of the best. It's amazing. I love all the sounds. But now that the movie's 20 plus odd years old, I'm watching it. I can pick out the different sound effects that they use. Oh, there's the elephant. Oh, there's that there's that tiger growl. Oh, there's the dolphin. I've watched these movies so many times now. It's just ingrained in my brain. I know all the little tidbits and secrets about how they made it. But anyway, I'm going to explain to you guys why I freaking love this franchise so much, so that you guys will get all the way off my back about it.
Not going to happen.
I was 5 years old when this movie came out, and it was the first movie I ever remember actually going to the theater to see.
So it's your Star Wars.
It's
I get it. I totally get it.
oh, okay. I don't have to talk anymore then.
Nope.
You're done now.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys.
Let Kadish talk for the rest of the hour.
Yeah, Kadish has the rest of the podcast. I'll see you guys
As he
later.
pulls out a book of things he wrote down. Here are my notes.
Here are my notes.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. Don't worry about it ever.
I'm not going to.
So I went to the theater. My dad took me. My mom was adamant that I was too young for this movie. She was like, "You are not going to take him to that movie. He's going to have nightmares. He's going to be terrified. This is not inappropriate." It was like PG-13. People are getting eaten. No. My dad's like, "He's fine. It's dinosaurs." I was freaking terrified. I was sitting in the theater, and I remember distinctly shaking, literally shaking in fear. And my dad had me in his lap, holding. Yeah, and I was like, "Oh my God!" Watching the T-Rex chase the Jeep down the road. When Ian's like, "You think they'll have that on the tour?" That moment, I was terrified. And of course, the kitchen scene, I was petrified at that. The raptors were the scariest thing in the world to me. And one of the I don't remember saying this, but my dad tells me all the time. He's like, I for sure thought when we walked out of there that you would I don't ever want to see a dinosaur ever again. You looked up at me and you were like, oh, this is my dad talking. He's like, you looked up at me and you were like, can we go watch it again?
Oh.
And then he was like, yes, as a matter of fact, we can.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with this movie, and I just never looked back. And later on, many, many years later, my dad gave me the books, because the books are definitely rated R. They're not child friendly at all. It's not I don't know. Spielberg did his Spielberg magic on it and made it kind of a family-friendly franchise. But the books from Michael Crichton are very dark, very explicit. And I read them when I was older, actually. I read them on book on tape, I think. I don't remember who the narrator was, but that's probably where I got my love
maybe where your love for that came from.
Probably. It all leads back to Jurassic Park. But I read the books, and I listened to the audio tapes, and man, these books are freaking good. There's as good as the movie, as good as I feel the movie is, the books are just a whole nother level. And it's it's one of those things that I can always look back on. My dad and I have always gone to every single Jurassic Park movie in theaters together. We went to The Lost World. We went to Jurassic Park 3. And once I got old enough and I had a job, I started paying for him to go. So now it's like my thing to like, hey, Dad, there's a new Jurassic Park movie. I'll pay for you. Let's go check it out. So it's that father-son thing. And having my little 5-year-old now, he freaking loves dinosaurs about as much as I did. And he loves these movies. And I'm going to see what this next one that comes out, Jurassic World Dominion, if it's appropriate to take him. But he's 5, so...
Don't matter.
Don't matter. I think I might just
Rite of
take him. Yep.
I have a question about the books.
Yeah, talk to me.
When you say they're dark and graphic, are they murdery and sweary, or are they sexy?
Sweary
Sweary.
and gory.
Gory. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, lots of... I mean,
Got
the
it.
first one...
Michael Crichton doesn't get sexy, Jude.
Yeah. He doesn't do... He does
I don't know if
sci-fi.
you've ever read any of his books.
Maybe
you?
in his off time he does.
Well, he's dead, so.
He's a ghostwriter.
I don't read books.
You don't read books? Do you listen to books?
No.
Get out of here.
No.
Fired.
When you, it's not the same. I don't, these people, it's like, oh yeah, I read that book. No, you didn't. You listened to it. That's not reading. That's not reading the book. It's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing?
No,
I think it is.
it absolutely is not.
How do you know if you
It's
don't read
not.
books or listen to them?
I mean, do you say I read the latest song on the radio today? You don't. It's a different experience.
I guess.
just like you can't
But
read-
it's the same amount of time dedicated to it.
It's a different show, but it's
Like, hey, I listened to 17 hours of this novel. Like,
Yeah.
you're dedicating 17 hours of your life to listen to
Yeah,
it.
how do you say that? Do you say
I listened to this book.
you listened to this book?
Yeah.
Okay.
I read the book.
well, that's fine.
But I
I-
did both. I listened to it and then I read them myself.
I know this book biblically.
it's like here it is for me. Okay, I spent God knows how long slogging through the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Okay,
I give you a lot of
now
credit.
some asshole comes up to me and goes, "Yeah, I read that book," but he really listened to it. No, it does not count. It's not the same
It's the
thing.
only way I could get through them. It's the only way I
not
could do
the
it.
same thing.
I've never-
You did not read those books. You listened to it.
I've actually never been able to get through the Lord of the Rings books.
Same.
What?
Yeah.
From an author?
I get to the first.
He's a writer, not a reader.
I get to the first chapter where they start singing, and I'm
Yeah.
just like, I can't read any more of this.
It's
my
a
favorite
hard
part.
read. It's a hard read.
It is.
I'm Tom Bombadil. This is not about dinosaurs anymore,
No,
guys.
just really quick. When those Lord of the Rings movies came out, and maybe we'll talk about them for real someday, but I had not read the books, and I knew they were coming out so far apart, right? So I told myself, I'm reading each book before I see the movie. And I did it. And I was very happy I did. But
That was the last time you ever read anything.
Proud of you.
maybe. I don't know. But
No, but these like Michael Crichton's novel, it's just there's a lot of different plot points that were taken out of the movie for obvious reasons. You can't have it would have been overinflated if they were to try to squeeze everything that was in the book in the movie. And I think some of the scenes that are actually some of the better parts of that novel. There's a scene where Alan Grant, Lex, and Tim they escape some area. They're on their way. They're trying to make it back to the visitor center, and the T-Rex is like sleeping. It fell asleep. And it's like laying in this little field area, and they have to sneak past it to get to a boat, and it like wakes up and it chases them into the water, and like all it's a fantastic scene, and it's terrifying. You're like, oh my god, it's gonna get them. I'm not necessarily thinking that
So-
he would have been able to do that on the movie.
a dinosaur chased a person,
Yeah.
and that's good. That's good
This
stuff.
is like Clerks 2, where the guy's like, "Oh, you watch Lord of the Rings, where they just walk the whole time." Like, I love dinosaur movies. Yeah, you just love watching people get chased by them. But no, I think I don't know, man. I mean, obviously, I fell in love with it because of my experience with my father and kind of growing up with that. So I have a heavy bias towards these movies. Like criticisms toward them just roll right off me. I'm like, whatever. Still a freaking awesome movie. So sorry.
No, you're right.
I totally get how you feel because that's how I am with shark movies.
Shark movies, yeah. Well, except for the Meg.
You can't see it, but I just rolled my eyes so hard.
Alex
Meg-
just checkmated Jude.
The Meg is a dinosaur. It counts.
Prehistoric.
Yeah,
I love that movie.
the
Did
movie
you go to
sucks.
that with us?
No, I saw it at home. I rented it
okay.
or something.
I walked
thought it
out
was
of that
cool.
movie so pissed.
Oh, that movie's so bad.
She was because she was such a big fan of the book.
Yeah.
And
I read all the books.
See, that's the thing, is I read the books after I saw the Jurassic Park movies. So somebody
Okay.
and they came out
That
really
makes a
quickly.
huge difference.
Because Michael Crichton published the book and then the movie came out 2 years later or something. So it was really, really quick. It didn't have time to become a big, Michael Crichton's movie or Michael Crichton's book, and they didn't do it justice.
Do you know the story behind that?
I think, probably not as much as you do, but I think I know.
Oh, he's smiling so Cheshire
I know
right
that
now. Just let
Steven
him go.
Spielberg read the book, contacted Crichton, was like, "Dude, this book is amazing. Can we make a movie out of it?" And Crichton was like, "Yeah, sure."
Not quite.
Can you give us the Crib Notes version?
Well, basically, so Crichton had been working on Jurassic Park, and he met with Spielberg because Spielberg was executive producing ER. And so they were going over the script that would eventually become the basis for the ER show. And Crichton kind of mentioned that he was working on this book about dinosaurs. And as he was telling it to Spielberg was like, I want to make that into a movie. And Crichton was like, tell you what, pay me $1.5 million. You can make it into a movie. And so it started this bidding war because Spielberg wanted to give him the money. And eventually he got Universal to pony up the $1.5 million and an extra $500,000 to have Crichton adapt it to a screenplay. And so basically the story of Jurassic Park is, yeah, you want to turn it into a movie? Just give me a lot of money.
And
That's not how it's supposed to work, right?
Such as Hollywood.
But it was through his association with Spielberg and making the ER show that Jurassic Park actually came to be in terms of the movie.
And weren't the sequels being written at the same time? Like the movie and the book were kind of being written at the same time?
Sort of.
Kind of.
I was going to wait till we got to Lost World to talk about
Spoiler.
But anyway, do you guys have any stories about watching this movie for the first time? Experiences? Kadish, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah. So I was 16 when I saw this movie for the
you're
first
old.
time. And yeah, Vader just looked at you. It was kind of funny because around this time, I really wanted to be a special effects artist. And Terminator 2 had come out, I think, either the year before or 2 years before. And this movie actually owes a lot to James Cameron because he's the one who spent 2 years pioneering the computer software that, was able to do a lot of these effects. And so coming off of Terminator 2, which is the movie that made me want to get into making movies and become a special effects artist initially, I was very interested in Jurassic Park when it came out because of the whole revolutionary special effects that they were doing.
Yeah, changed the game.
Yeah. And I must have seen it 5 times in the theater. I was just super impressed with it. I was in love with Spielberg at the time. And just every movie he ever made, I was just breaking down and studying and watching over and over again. And it was a fun little cinematic experience getting to see dinosaurs come to life because that was a big thing. It's nobody's ever seen dinosaurs like this. And it's kind of funny because originally Spielberg had just planned to do the stop motion animation with the dinosaurs.
That made it into the movie too because there was a scene where I think it was Dennis, what's the special effects guy's name? I know all the Star Wars guys go crazy about him. Dennis Muren?
That sounds right, yeah.
I think it's Dennis Muren. And he was working with the special effects, and of course they had somebody in there that was doing the stop motion, which was the original plan, was to have all the raptors and dinosaurs as stop motion. And it was Spielberg was like, "Oh, it looks great," but then somebody showed him a skeleton. It was only a skeleton. It had no muscles, no skin or nothing. A skeleton T-Rex walking through a field, and Spielberg was just blown away. And there was a line that he said to the stop motion guy, and he's like, "Well, it looks like I'm out of a job." And then somebody behind him said, "Don't you mean extinct?" And that line is brought into the movie when Ian Malcolm is talking to Alan Grant, and then Alan Grant's like, "I think I'm out of a job because they have real dinosaurs. What do they need me, a paleontologist, for?" And Ian Malcolm said, "Don't you mean extinct?" And it was it's a cool little hint, a little ribbing towards the animatronic guys. But it actually they utilized both teams really well, which is to Spielberg's credit. He didn't just "Oh, I don't need you guys anymore, fire them, move on, do everything computerized." What he did was he actually took the stop motion guys' knowledge of movement frame by frame, and he used them to translate it onto a computer screen with these little robotic dinosaurs that they built that would track the motions, and they would have the guys do the stop motion, and it would translate it to the computer, and then the computer would go to the final product. So I always thought that was a really nice thing that Spielberg did, because he very easily could have been "All right, well, I don't need you anymore, so bugger off, I'm going to do this computer stuff." But No, he's like, no, I think your knowledge can be translated and used efficiently. I mean, this movie still holds up like 20 some odd years
Yeah,
later.
Yeah.
one of the surprising things that I noticed on my rewatch was that the special effects hold up really well.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the CGI, it wasn't all CGI, like it was blended with practical animatronic effects and stuff like that. And so like, I don't know, like it just, 20 years later, like this movie is still like looking really good.
I almost feel like the first movie, the effects are better than the third one,
Oh yeah, for sure.
it was strange to me watching that.
You can make the argument, and I've seen, side by side comparisons of the new movies that Colin Trevorrow's doing with the original, and it's still, it's like,
Well, the new movies are 100% computer, right?
yes.
Yes, because
Except for Fallen Kingdom had animatronic. The Indoraptor was animatronic.
Okay.
But the Jurassic World, I think everything was computerized except for maybe a handful of scenes. But yeah, but one of the things that you were talking about, like the transitioning of using practical and computerized. One thing that really benefits the movie with the computerized version of the T-Rex and stuff is everything's shot at night with low light. It's always raining, so everything looks wet. So you don't have that like glossy plastic feel in a dry environment. There was one scene that transition was just freaking perfect, as somebody who just like loves like film and cinema and stuff like that, and how you set up a shot. But there's a scene where after the T-Rex leaves, Alan and Ian were in the truck looking out the windshield, and you see the T-Rex head, and then it rises up and it goes just out of frame, and then it changes to the CGI version like seamlessly. The head goes up and then it walks out, and you're like, it was such a cool scene to see, and they meshed those two scenes so well together. I thought it was fantastic. But yeah, this movie, the only thing that I think is starting to show its age the most is the kitchen scene with the raptors. I felt like that was just now starting to kind of seem a little iffy.
Well, another thing about this movie that kind of helps it stand the test of time is the fact that it's very well written.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can tell that like an actual writer was responsible for this screenplay, even though David Koepp gets credit as the screenwriter. A lot of this was Michael Crichton adapting his own book. And I can remember after I saw this movie in the theaters, I went and bought the book and actually read the book. And that kind of got me into reading all of Michael Crichton's other stuff. And I think Jurassic Park is probably the only book of his that I actually found interesting, because a lot of his other books are very dry. They're all about the science.
I couldn't get through Prey.
Try Andromeda Strain sometime.
I'll give it a shot.
Even Eaters of the Dead, which was that Viking book that he wrote, like I was like, oh, this is about Vikings. This is going to be cool. It was like, nope, really boring. And but Crichton was someone who really understood, how to tell like a good story just from like a meta point of view. And how I often complain about modern movies in the sense that the directors or the storytellers, they come up with set pieces and then they base the movie around these set pieces just to kind of as an excuse to do the set pieces as opposed to them actually being part of the story. And one of the things that I really like about the first Jurassic Park is that the set pieces are an outgrowth of the story, and they actually help to move the story along. Like that first scene when the T-Rex breaks out of his cage and he's like terrorizing the two cars, like that scene is like so iconic. Like I can remember, just like seeing that cup of water with the ripples as like, the footsteps.
Do you know the story behind that cup of water with the ripples?
With the violin string.
God damn it. Yes.
Can't you just have him?
It was
let him have one thing.
Guitar string, I believe, though. Well, either that or a piano string. But the funny part is that like the guy that was in charge of doing that one scene, Spielberg was like, hey, I want to get like perfect little ripples in a cup and have that film to kind of like showcase that the T-Rex is on its way or it's kind of around or something like that. And the guy was like, yeah, no problem. I got that. And he was like, it was weeks. He didn't know how to do it. Everything he tried made like different effects, and it wasn't that perfect little like ripple effect that he wanted. And he was like, and like every week Spielberg would be like, hey, how's that scene going? He's like, oh, I got it. Everything's fine, Mr. Spielberg. Everything's good. And he was like, I can't do it. It was like the day on set where he showed up and he was like, last ditch effort. Like, oh, I'm just going to like freaking put a guitar string underneath the dashboard of the car and pluck it and see if that works. And it just happened.
Oh, that's how they did it.
Yeah.
I did not know that. That's cool.
Yeah. I always laughed at that. Like the guy was like freaking out because he didn't know how to do it. And he kept telling Spielberg that he did. He's like, oh yeah, no problem. Got it in the bag. Anyway, keep going.
And Dean Cundy's cinematography in this movie is really good. He's the guy who did Escape from New York. He was a cinematographer for that, and he's done all types of big movies. But I think this was the last movie before Spielberg switched cinematographers to the guy Janusz Kaminski, the guy he's used like ever since. And I'm not a big fan of Janusz Kaminski's cinematography, but it always felt like pre that guy, Spielberg movies were a lot more colorful and a lot like more interesting in terms of how they lit stuff. So, it just felt like Jurassic Park was like a perfect storm of like, of filmmaking in the sense that the technology was new and groundbreaking. The story was good. The acting was good. The direction was good. And Spielberg really treated it like a horror film, which was what was really interesting. And it's easy to forget that the guy who made E.T. and Indiana Jones and stuff also made Jaws. And, his approach to this movie, even though people say it's for kids, it's like, well, he was making a monster movie. He was making a horror movie. And the way he, staged the dinosaur scenes where, those were the monsters. First it was the T-Rex, then it moved to the raptors and stuff like that. But, the dark and stormy night, the lightning, all that stuff, it was really cool. And they actually, when Spielberg actually set up a sequel with the loss of that shaving can that had all the embryos in it.
Yeah.
That never went anywhere.
Nope.
No, that got dropped.
Yeah, but overall, it's a classic. There's just no denying Jurassic Park is a classic film.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Jude,
And it was also one of the first films to break $1 billion at the box office.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool. Every time it's in theaters, I go and see it. I went to the 20th anniversary, 25th anniversary. Every time it pops up at a local theater or something, I'm like, bought the ticket. Dad, we're going to the movies.
I think it was Spielberg's third movie that became the highest grossing film of all time.
Nice.
Something like that.
Jude, you have anything to add to this conversation? Really?
No, I'm kidding.
That used to be my line.
Yeah.
Nope. I don't have the nostalgia or the history that y'all do for this movie. I enjoy this movie, and I agree that it holds up, and the storytelling is great, and the visual effects are awesome. My history with this movie is when it came out, I was in high school. God, I'm old. And
Makes me feel good.
I was dating my very shitty high school boyfriend at the time, and I watched it with him, and that's kind of the first thing that I think of when I watched this movie.
What a terrible
He's a terrible person.
And then the second time she watched it with her shitty fiance.
Well, next time it comes to town, we'll all go together.
There you go.
Yay.
You'll have a good memory that way of it.
Nice. It's a good idea.
So
That's it?
So
And that's all I've got to say about that.
All right. Do you have I'm sure we're going to talk for at least a little bit longer. Do you have any favorite scenes or anything like that you wanted to talk about? Because how many times have you seen it?
Oh, probably just maybe 3 or 4 times.
Okay. And
Yeah.
just recently you watched it for the podcast?
Yeah.
Okay. What does anything strike you now versus then? Or
I love that scene with the T-Rex and the kids, and I don't know. I like it beginning to end. I have more to say, I think, about the second one than I do about the first one.
Okay.
Because I usually have more to say about things that I don't like than things that I do like. So
I will
I'll
say
let y'all continue.
My favorite scene is just Sam Jackson saying, "Hold on to your butts."
hold on to your butts. That's right. There's so many great one-liners in this movie.
Dodson, we got Dodson over here.
You didn't say the magic word. It's just riddled with perfect one-liners and stuff. Matt Vader, what's
Yes,
your
sir.
experience with this movie? When did you see it?
Well, I obviously went and saw it when it first came out. I don't remember when exactly or who I was with or what theater, but I do know I went. I remember the sound being very impressive. It was just a good movie. It was fun. It's a good, fun Spielberg movie. It's a classic, just like you said. I don't have a lot to add to the conversation, but that hasn't been said already. But it was groundbreaking. It was awesome.
Yeah. I would like to point out that in the book, what's the name? What's the main archaeologist guy? Alan Grant.
Yeah.
So in the book, Alan Grant, he actually likes children.
Yes.
And Spielberg made the decision to have the movie version not like children so that he could actually have an arc
Yeah.
in the story where like he's stuck saving these kids' lives and he comes to like care for them and stuff like that. And that's always to me the sign of like a really good filmmaker is like you can take these characters and you can like figure out a way to give them interesting arcs. And one of the things that Spielberg has always excelled at was like the kind of the same theme that James Cameron follows in his movies. Is like his films are always about the family unit. It's about people coming together as a family. And when you look at Alan Grant, the character, he's this kind of upright archaeologist guy. Like he doesn't really like children. In fact, his introduction is about him. Yeah, his introduction is about him basically traumatizing a little kid.
It was amazing.
And throughout the course of this movie, you see him kind of become this father figure to these two kids who were going through, like, their parents are going through a divorce and their grandpa's kind of an asshole. And
that's another thing too. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I rewatched this movie, I didn't remember, what's the old dude's name?
Hammond. John Hammond.
I didn't remember him being such a kook.
He was a little weird.
Yeah.
I think that was Richard Attenborough.
Yeah, it was.
Like the actor himself, like kind of brought that, because in the book, he like Hammond's like a real jerk.
He's a jackass.
Okay.
He's pretty evil in the book. But like when Spielberg cast Sir Richard Attenborough, this is the guy who did like these like big Planet Earth documentaries, and he's this very friendly, affable guy, and so like. And in the book, he actually dies. He gets killed. But in the movie, Spielberg was like, well, I really like this guy, so maybe we shouldn't kill him off.
Yeah. There's a lot of people in the book that kicked it.
Malcolm died in the book.
Malcolm technically dies in the book, but they do a little narrative backflip to get him back for the second one.
They retconned it.
Yeah, they retconned it because everybody liked the character so much.
And that was all because of Jeff Goldblum's portrayal.
100%. Yeah. Everybody was like, dude, Jeff Goldblum and Ian Malcolm, that's the greatest, character in the whole movie. I love him. And they were like, so he was like a fan favorite in the movie. So when Crichton was writing the second book, essentially, like it's never outright stated that he died. I don't think in the first book. I think it's implied that he didn't make it because they kind of set it up like, hey, Ian's dying if we don't get out of here within this amount of time.
I think in the book he died of an infection from his leg injury.
Yeah, something like it was something kind of,
and it was in like the very last chapter.
Yeah,
or
it was
something like that.
Very, very end.
Was he as like enjoyable of a character in the book as he was in the movie?
Yeah. Almost identical to the movie. Yeah, they stayed pretty true.
He's Jeff Goldblum in the book?
Pretty close.
Really?
Yeah, except for maybe the mannerisms, but as far as like the Ian Malcolm's personality of being like this high mighty, I'm smarter than everybody else, like, yeah, that's all there.
I just felt like he was me and Jeff Goldblum. Because Jeff Goldblum's the same dude in every movie Jeff Goldblum's in.
It's written specifically for him.
Yeah, it just fit the character so well.
Well, the whole point of Ian Malcolm was he was supposed to be one of these like academic rock stars. Like he was like the fringe mathematician guy. So like he had like the spiky hair and the leather jacket, and like not the type of guy you'd look at and be like, oh, that guy's into math. It's like, he was kind of like the cool dude.
Yeah, and he, again, like his whole attitude was like, I'm smarter than everybody in this room.
Yeah,
like that's
chaos.
Chaos theory. I know exactly what's gonna, like his whole attitude when he goes to the island in the book and in the film is like, this is a failure, like right away, immediately. He's like, this is gonna fall apart in like T-minus 5 minutes.
And he's correct.
And he was correct.
And one of the interesting bits about the book was kind of because Crichton likes to get into like the weird science stuff in his books. And so his explanations about chaos theory were, I thought, like really interesting.
Oh, they're chapters long.
Yeah.
Whole chapters with Ian just like talking serious mathematician, like mumbo jumbo.
And that sounds terrible.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, but luckily in the movie they were able to kind of like just condense it down into something more digestible.
I still like it though. I don't know, when I'm listening to the book or reading the book myself, it makes sense because it kind of gives you context for what is happening in the movie, why things are falling apart.
Well, he basically in the movie just wrapped it all up with a little rain dot scene going down her face or whatever, right?
Yeah, like it's unpredictable. Everything's unpredictable, especially when it comes to nature. And that's one of the driving themes of this whole franchise is like you can't, and no matter how hard humans try, you cannot control nature.
No.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I feel like the newer movies are kind of staying in line with that theme, which is why I like them, even though they're not perfect.
Life finds a way.
Life finds a way.
That's the theme.
Life finds a way.
As long as the casinos stay open, we'll be okay.
Nope. They're still shut down. Anyway, so yeah, like the characters, like if you're looking at them from the versus the book, there's a lot of different things that happen. Henry Wu, the doctor who was in charge of like the genetics lab and stuff like that in the movie, he survives. He gets off the island long before everything goes to hell. But in the book, he was there with them, and he ends up getting like eaten by a raptor, and it's like pretty graphic. Like it tells you like, hey, his stomach gets ripped open, and his intestines get out, and the raptor grabs him and drags him outside, and he's like screaming. Like, yeah, that's graphic. I love this book so much.
Yeah, the book is way more violent than the movie.
Oh yeah, leaps and bounds.
You're making me want to read the book.
Yeah,
you should definitely.
Now I kind of want to go pick it up.
And the raptors. I mean, as scary as the raptors are in the movie, the book, it's like. Yep. Level 10.
Might be a book I can listen to.
I will say, out of all the Crichton
Scott
books,
Brick narrates that book.
out of all the Crichton books that I've read, Jurassic Park's definitely the best.
Yeah. Actually, we'll talk about it in a minute, but like between the two of them, Jurassic Park is probably like the best written one. But I actually really love the Lost World book. It's such a fun adventure movie that it just goes completely haywire. I love that book. That's my favorite one out of the two.
The book or the movie?
The book.
Okay.
Yeah, the book. Oh no. The movie. Like this is one of the times
I can't wait to dive in.
Well, we can in a minute. If anybody else has anything to say about the first one, but I wanted to make sure that we shout out to not shout out, but I wanted to make sure that we talk about John Williams' musical theme.
Oh yeah,
like you were mentioning.
Copyright.
Boom.
Claimed.
One of the things that you mentioned was actually kind of interesting is that you're right, like Spielberg shot this movie like a horror movie or at least more along the lines of like Jaws, where you don't actually
Creature feature.
Yeah, you don't actually see anything until almost an hour into the movie is when the T-Rex finally shows up. So it's a pretty slow burn, but once things happen, then it happens quickly, and you have like 45 minutes of just pure terror.
Totally builds up that anticipation.
The whole first act of the first Jurassic Park is just set up.
Yeah.
I think that scene where they are driving in the Jeeps and they come up on the hill and they see
that's my dad's favorite scene.
I think that's my favorite scene in the movie too.
Yeah.
And that was the first time we got to see the dinosaurs.
Yeah. It's like where,
and man, what a
Alan
sight.
Grant, he just like buckles over, gets on his knees and stuff. And it's just like, I mean, that was a great scene. Mm-hmm. It was just like, what would a normal person do? And all of a sudden there's a 80-foot tall brontosaurus eating leaves off the top of the
Brachiosaurus. Yeah.
What a brachiosaurus. Sorry.
No, I'm just messing with you. It is a brachiosaurus.
That was a great scene.
Yeah, it's my dad's favorite scene. That's the one he always points to.
And that's the one where like, the theme swells and you kind of get to see the special effects and all their majesty.
He reaches down and twists her head over to look at the herd.
Yes, I love that.
They're moving in herds. They do move in herds. Like it's a great, fantastic scene. I wanted to talk about the score though, because you mentioned it. That's like when we hear it in its full glory. Spielberg made this movie more along the lines of like a Jaws horror type movie, but John Williams shot it more like...
You mean scored it?
Scored the movie more like a, I don't know, like a love story to nature, like how majestic these creatures are. They're not monsters, they're just animals.
It is a very majestic score.
Yeah, it's another
good
thing.
word.
If you look at like something like Jaws, like dun dun, like there's none of that in Jurassic Park anywhere. It's not scored like a monster movie at all. I mean, there's like dangerous music going on. I think the darker tempos are when they go to the raptor paddock and they have like that I can't remember how it goes, but it's a darker theme for the music. But other than that, like it's kind of presented of like, and it's mentioned in the movie as well, that these aren't monsters. They're just animals. And it's the first time, it's the cat and the canary, right? And I think that's another line from one of the newer movies with Colin Trevorrow is like to a canary, a cat is a monster. It's all just relative on your perspective on things, but these are just animals and they're just here to try to survive. And it's just a fact of life. And that's what causes all this chaos is somebody's like, well, let's mix humans and dinosaurs together and see what happens.
Yeah. And I think that is what kind of makes it so iconic too, is that the blending of genres in the way that it was shot and scored and written, it just blended together so beautifully and organically that it created this very one-of-a-kind iconic movie.
Yeah.
And it is interesting because Crichton, being the geek that he is, like a lot of the book is really about like all the DNA aspects of like, genetically engineering like a dinosaur. And in the movie, they kind of gloss over a lot of that stuff. Like they show like how
They have like a little montage where they go through the little ride.
Yeah.
yeah, they have like a little cartoon DNA strand.
Mr. DNA.
Yeah,
Mr. DNA. Yeah.
And they explain it in a way where like anyone can understand what DNA is.
Yeah.
But they take this really complicated subject, which in the book he spends like chapters talking about, and they just kind of condense it down, and then it's like, okay. But one of the interesting aspects of the movie to me was like like when we find out that the dinosaurs are mating and or reproducing, because as a plot point they said, oh, all the dinosaurs are female, so they can't reproduce. We have a very controlled environment. And Alan Grant later discovers, he's like, oh, they used amphibian DNA to kind of fill in the gaps with the dinosaurs, and amphibians have been known, like in a single sex environment, to actually change sexes.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that kind of solves that little mystery there.
Self-reproduce.
So like it had like, just a really good story where like,
It's just really good setup for the
Yeah.
whole thing. Yeah.
yeah, like everything in this movie is explained and properly set up and paid off. And, because once the park kind of gets sabotaged and the dinosaurs get loose, like that's when the action starts and everything starts going like, full steam ahead. But because they spent that first act just setting up everything, they didn't need to slow down. They could just like go full steam ahead to the end.
You would think some current filmmakers would take that and
You would
use
think,
it as an
you would
example.
you would think Spielberg would continue to know how to do that, but apparently he forgets every couple movies.
Takes too long, costs too much.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing I want to mention about the book that kind of addresses a lot of the things that happen in the movie that kind of gets condensed. But in the book, there's like this tracking system that they have on the island that helps them to keep track of where the animals are and how many there are. And Ian Malcolm immediately is like, that system doesn't work. And of course, everybody at the island is like, what are you talking about? We've spent millions of dollars designing this computer program. It works perfectly. It tells you everything you need to know, blah, blah, blah. And later on in the movie, they find out that once they find out that the animals are breeding, Ian Malcolm's like, so this computer program is designed to pick up how many animals? And they're like 327 animals on the island. That's, it checks to make sure they're there. And he's like, change the algorithm to detect 400 animals. And it just goes tick, 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 and it starts tracking all the animals. And apparently they've been breeding for like months and months and months. And it's completely out of control. And nobody had a clue because they just they're trusting the technology.
Yeah, basically they said, okay, we have 300 dinosaurs on this island, so we set our software to only track 300 dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And so like as they were breeding, the software didn't pick up the extra numbers. And then once they started lifting the ceiling on the amount of numbers for the computer to track, they realized, oh shit,
Yeah.
there's a lot of dinosaurs on this island.
There's another really cool plot point that I'm kind of upset that they never addressed in any of the movies, except for they're starting to address it more in the newer ones, but even it's almost too little too late. But in the first book, it's set up that the dinosaurs have gotten off the island. Like there's a whole scene where there's a baby in a brand new born baby in a crib and at some hospital in Costa Rica area. And the little compies, the little green ones from the second movie, the little chicken-sized ones, there's like hundreds of them loose on the mainland, and they hop into this little hospital area and they start eating the baby. And that's a graphic scene in the book. And it was like, it's a continued plot point. Like, hey, we found this dinosaur, send it to, the lab over in New York and see if they can analyze it and find out what it is. And eventually Alan Grant actually gets a X-ray copy of the animal, and somebody was like, hey, can you check the skeleton? And he's like, that's a Procompsognathus. Like, what is this? Is this a news thing, or did you guys find this somewhere? And he's like, no, this is a live animal. We just caught it. It was eaten by another animal, and we found the carcass. And he's like, that's a dinosaur. So it's a really cool plot point that I really wish that the movies would have picked up on more.
Yeah, there were a couple scenes from the first book that they didn't include in the first movie that they
shoehorned into the second one.
Yeah, they shoehorned it. That's a good term for it.
Into the second movie?
Yeah.